Chapter 4. What do you think of the Empire? A scene back in the military academy. They were hanging out in the corner of a classroom, doing nothing at all, when Loa had suddenly asked this question of the four of them out of the blue. What do we think? Glenn repeated after the four exchanged glances, getting the ball rolling. I'm proud, of course. Earthworld is glorious. As a soldier, it's an honor to devote myself to my country. Except you haven't been enlisted yet, Wayne butted in. Glenn groaned. Well, yeah, but if my grades are any indication. You mean in all the classes that I beat you in, other than martial arts, those grades? Whoa, you cheater. You can't just throw a punch out of nowhere. Shut it. I'm gonna end you. Wayne and Glenn started to grapple with each other, clamoring over desks and chairs, as Loa turned to Strang. What do you think? You're asking someone from the provinces, Strang asked back with a bitter smile. The provinces were nations that had lost to the Empire, becoming shadows of their former glory. It was easy to see why someone from these areas might have complicated feelings about their conqueror. To answer your question, I think it's impressive, seizing land and integrating people and cultures into their own. They became the rulers of the eastern half of the continent in the blink of an eye. That's no easy feat. Well, that's what the losers have to say. Otherwise, they'd have to admit their own faults, Wayne added. Why can't you just shut your trap? It's my mission to provoke others at every opportunity. Give up your delusional little goal. Loa giggled at this volley between Wayne and Strang before turning to Nim. What do you think? Well, as a flam, I think it's easier to exist here. The Empire was home to a wide array of ethnicities. As a meritocracy, there was relatively less discrimination here. Even those in the provinces or people facing oppression in the West could succeed on the basis of their skills and accomplishments. Right. I've heard prejudice against the Flam is bad in the West. Who needs those guys? The Empire could beat the bias straight out of them. Glenn proclaimed before looking at Wayne. Hey, are you being a prick to Nim? What? Provoking others? That's the worst. Why would I ever do such a thing, Glenn? You're seriously, Glenn shouted. Obvious nepotism, Strang remarked. Loa took a sidelong glance at Glenn, reacting indignantly, and Strang smirking wryly before posing the question to the final member. What do you think about the Empire, Wayne? Fit for use, he answered frankly. What do you mean by that? Nothing more. I don't love it or hate it, but there always are ways that it can serve me, that's all. Wayne shrugged. I mean, the relationship between a citizen and country shouldn't be a bad deal. If they're in disagreement, the citizen is free to move elsewhere. I think patriotism and national devotion are huge pains in the ass. How very Wayne of you. Well, I'm impressed that the Empire lets me think this way, Wayne admitted, turning toward Loa. But more importantly, what do you think of the Empire? Me? I love it, of course, she replied, leaving no room for debate. I was born and raised here, but I guess that's why I'm frustrated by some aspects of it. Oh, for example? Well, Loa adopted a mischievous tone, like the fact that you haven't been arrested yet, Wayne. Agreed, 100%. Can't argue with that. I think a little adversity would do him some good. Hey, you guys are the worst, you know that, right? Loa giggled as she observed her friends fly into an uproar, smoldering a passionate fury deep within her that nobody could see. I have no idea. It had been some time since the Imperial envoys arrived in Natra. Wayne was in his office alone, clawing at his head. I can't figure out what's going on in that noggin of hers. Seriously, what did Loa come here for? Ever since their secret meeting, he observed her every move in search of a motive. And since Wayne was the only one entertaining her, there were plenty of opportunities to keep an eye on her. But he couldn't find anything. He knew she was touring Natra under the pretext of enriching herself, but he caught no suspicious activity whatsoever. She appeared to actually sightsee. But I know she's up to something. Wayne crossed his arms, hemming and hawing when a knock came at the office door. May I come in? His little sister, Felania, appeared in the doorway. Wayne quickly straightened up and beamed. Oh, it's you, Felania. How did the meeting go? I'm super tired. And to think you sit through them every day. Felania let out a long, exhausted sigh, sounding as if she were deflating. As per their earlier discussion, Falania had been entrusted with a handful of his usual duties while Wayne was busy dealing with the Imperial envoys. Attending this meeting was one of them. Give it time and you'll get used to them. When I first started, my shoulders would always get stiff. Wayne consoled, running his fingers through his hair once she'd made her way over to him. Falania began to close her eyes. Once they return home, everything will go back to normal. Bear with me. I'll try to keep your responsibilities to a minimum, he assured her. She pouted. Am I really that unreliable? Wayne blinked back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. You're doing great, Falania. I'm going to have to ask for more of your help when the opportunity arises. Is that okay? Falania broke into a smile. Of course. Leave it to me, Wayne. She gave him a big squeeze. Nothing makes a big brother happier than watching his sister grow up, he added, stroking her hair. Falania spoke with more fervor. I'll have to work hard to catch up to you. There's no rush. I'll talk to Nanim and see how we can increase your workload little by little. She nodded before realizing something. By the way, Wayne, where is she? Oh, Nanim is in the kingdom of Natra. Even commoners soaked in baths. It wasn't that they were particularly fussy or neat. Given the harsh climate, it was common knowledge that warm water could help beat back the cold. Moreover, Natra was a country blessed with an abundant source of water that allowed for liberal use. In select locations there were hot springs that gushed out of the ground, though not enough to make them a famous vacation destination or anything. Public bathhouses were a staple in larger towns. In the dead of winter, relaxing in their warm tubs was considered the height of pleasure for the citizens of this kingdom. Naturally, this was no different for the upper class. It's as splendid as the first time. Here in the palace lay one of the bathhouses built to serve the elite. It had the capacity for a few dozen, but was currently reserved for one person's private use, ever since the arrival of the Imperial envoys, and that was none other than Princess Lowelmina, who was soaking in the bath at this very moment. The water feels warmer than the baths in the Empire. It must be because it's so cold outside. I'm delighted that it pleases you, Your Imperial Highness, replied Nanim with a voice tinged with concern. But what's the matter? Why must I accompany you? Nanim was currently undressed in the tub alongside Lowelmina. She had been invited by the princess, meaning she couldn't possibly refuse. But it was unprecedented for a foreign retainer to bathe with royalty. But didn't we do this all the time at the academy? Our social standings are different now. Let's just say we toss those aside along with our clothes. Don't be ridiculous, Nanim warned with her expression. Lowelmina continued to spew more nonsense, which means you could be more informal with me. Nanim's cheeks twitched as she turned to the side. Your Imperial Highness, rang out a demure voice from her line of sight. If you wish to rekindle your friendship, I believe I should take my leave, suggested Lowelmina's attendant, Faish Blundell. She'd stripped bare to enter the bath, exposing her generous chest from the confines of her clothing without any shame. Faish, wouldn't that leave me all alone with a foreigner? What if something happened? You've already locked yourself away in secret meetings with them on multiple occasions. And suddenly, I can't remember. What about your remarks about disregarding social status? How about we focus on the future instead? Nanim and Faish exchanged glances upon hearing her be all nonchalant, empathizing with each other's burdens. Just this once. How does that sound? Nanim asked the attendant before her. I don't see why not. Faish held out her hand, which Nanim took. For just this moment, the two had overcome borders to become friends. Are you leaving me out? You're going to make me cry. Stop it. This is no laughing matter. Then let's talk. Faish, would you like to begin? Yes, this may not be a sophisticated topic, but I've heard of your time as classmates at the military academy. How did you spend your time together? Nanim and Lowelmina looked at each other. Let's see. There were two others besides me, Nanim, and Wayne, Glenn and Strang. The five of us were always together. The popular kids at school. You mean troublemakers. They overlooked our shenanigans thanks to our grades. I can't deny there's some truth to that, but it's no question we were popular, especially Nanim. After the whole situation with that duel, even the girls had respect for her. A duel? Faish blinked back. Nanim sighed next to her. Someone insulted me for being a flam. I challenged them to a duel and gave them a good thrashing. That's all, as if. There are many gentlemen charmed by your dignity. I know there was a heap of love letters you had to reject by hand, isn't that right? Nanim assumed a bitter expression, but it wasn't anything she couldn't handle. Is this how it's gonna be? I could say the same for you, Loa. We've heard of the stream of nobles courting you, even in Natra. I think I remember hearing Enkadul and Libid just won't give up. To tell you the truth, those two have plagued me, Loamina sighed. I gave them a few pointers when they were struggling to remember proper etiquette at a soiree, and that launched a rush of letters and presents, and all in awful taste. That's rare for you to say, Loa. Would you like me to show you one of the letters? On the surface, each insists they have all the qualities necessary to be the perfect consort to an imperial princess, which means they only see me as a crown jewel to adorn themselves. They're on an awful taste in cheap jewelry, and I'm sure you'd feel the same if you saw firsthand. You have my deepest condolences. Loamina began to whisper as if in prayer. I hope this visit will encourage them to give up on me. To that, Faish shook her head almost cruelly. They are the tenacious type, in my opinion, and this may ignite their passion. You heard her, Loa. Faish, recount every single detail of your romantic encounters. Spit it out now. Loa teased Faish, who planted her foot firmly in her own mouth. They continued to chat for a long while afterwards. And that's why Nanim is in the middle of taking a bath with Loamina. Felania growled like a small animal. No fair. I haven't even been able to take a bath with Nanim lately. From Felania's side of things, the Imperial Princess had already attempted to steal her brother away, which meant she didn't have a favorable opinion of Loamina from the start. The Imperial Princess had some nerve trying to take Nanim away from her, too. Felania vowed she would never forgive Loamina until she apologized. No need to pout, Wayne assured, poking her cheeks. I'll tell her to make some time for you. Really? The three of us can take a bath together? Me too. I think we're too old for that. It'll be fine. I don't mind at all. Okay. I'll think about it. Wayne placated with the slyness of a politician. I promised to consider a request to zero intent to follow through. He quickly changed the subject. By the way, Felania, how are your studies coming along? Making any progress? Ack. Her reaction was more than enough for Wayne to grasp the situation. He chuckled. No worries. Claudius might not forgive his students for horsing around, but he's patient with those who need a little more help. If you want to learn, you will. But I've been distracted by other things lately, and I haven't been paying attention to my lessons. I think he's still cross with me, she admitted apologetically. Wayne patted her head. Don't worry. He would have died in a fit of rage while teaching me if there was any chance that could be true. Let's see. To make up for lost time, do you want to have a remedial lesson? I think I can carve out some time to teach my one and only sister. Her eyes widened with surprise, and then with glee. I'd love that. Alrighty, what have you been learning from Claudius? About the Empire. It kept getting bigger and bigger, conquering a bunch of countries. And there were a few standout nations. Got it. Burnock, Kodlafi, Todrelin. Each country has a story of their downfall, but I guess we don't have time to cover everything. In that case, let's go with Enkadul. Wayne took the feather quill on his desk and a piece of scrap paper from a stack of documents. He began to draw in the margins, creating a map of the eastern continent. Our kingdom of Natra is positioned in the center of the continent at its northernmost tip. To the west we have Mardin, which is now a defunct country. To the east we have the Garen state, aka Imperial Territory. Felania, do you know what their specialty is? Textiles. I've heard the quality is very good, especially those that have been mere dyed, which produces a mysteriously glossy finish. They've been regularly used by successive generations of Earthworld emperors. It's rare to find them on the market. If only they would offer them wholesaled in Natra, Wayne grumbled to himself. The Garen state was originally called the Kingdom of Enkadul. The Empire annexed it shortly before we were born, but the events leading up to their fall earned its king the reputation of the biggest poseur on the continent. What do you mean? At the time, the Empire had just defeated the nations in the south, Bernac and Kotlafe. They were hungry to make rapid progress, but we all tend to bash those who are different from us. The remaining nations in the east began to feel the heat. There was a big chance they could unite to topple this threat. That was how the Anti-Empire Alliance was formed. Wayne wrote a list of nations on the map. Among them was Ant-Gadol. By blocking out imperial territories in black, it was clear just how many nations in the east had joined hands to fight against them. The alliance cornered the empire, annexing their conquered territories. If this had continued, the empire might not have existed today. Wayne continued, but the situation changed when the king of Antigold declared vassalage to the empire. What? He made himself a vassal? Of his own will? Yeah, look at the map. Ant-Gadol is in the northeastern part of the continent, and the empire in the southeast. They're as small as us, but the anti-imperial alliance had been stabbed in the back. Falania, what do you think the group should have done? Wayne asked as he marked Ant-Gadol in black. Falania thought for a moment. I think they should focus on Ant-Gadol and try to topple them. That would be ideal, but their king prevented that from happening. He bought time by tripping up the alliance with his negotiation skills. Meanwhile, the empire pincered them, crushing every nation in the group. The map was colored black. There was barely any white spaces left at all. In the end, the alliance collapsed, securing imperial hegemony in the east. The defeated royal families were either stripped of their titles and banished from their kingdoms or executed. Except for the king of Ant-Gadol. He was bestowed the title of Marquis and given control of his own colony. This is why he's called a charlatan, Wayne concluded. Falania exiled to betray the alliance and give up his kingship? Why would he do such a thing? Even if the alliance won, it would have simply resulted in an era of rivaling warlords. Ant-Gadol knew it would be crushed sooner or later. In his memoirs, the king writes that he thought it would be better to let the empire win and secure a place among them. But Wayne knew that didn't mean it was the only reason. A memoir. I didn't know there was one. He wrote it in his later years, a rare tome with only 30 copies. I have one in my library. You're free to read it. Falania nodded, then cocked her head. Wait, what do you mean by later years? The king has already passed away. He was already well on in his years before he became a vassal, and his boy is the second marquis. Well, boy in air quotes. He has children older than us. Is he just as great? I don't have any first-hand experience with him, but I've heard certain things. Vulgar, despotic, known to shirk his duties, lacking an appreciation of the arts, not even knowledgeable in military affairs. All he's inherited from his father are looks and ambition, not courage or wisdom. Falania adopted a complex expression. He's famous for not getting along with the Governor-General of the Garen state, he went on. One is the Marquis, who owns half the state. The other is a Governor-General sent by the central government with the authority to act as magistrate. I guess it's only natural that would cause them to butt heads. A knock came at the office door. Pardon me. Ah, Princess Falania, you're here too. Oh, Ninim. Falania trotted up to Ninim as soon as she saw her enter the room. I heard from Wayne. He said you were bathing with the Imperial Princess. I was relieved of my duties a moment ago. Why do you appear displeased? Wayne laughed. Our little sister is angry that someone took away her big sis. I see. I'll make sure to carve out time for us to visit the bathhouse together, Princess Falania. Really? Promise me, Ninim. Of course. They concluded their conversation on friendly terms. Wayne spoke up. By the way, where is Princess Lowelmina? She has retired to her room. Any intel? I'll report everything in detail later, but there isn't a solid lead, unfortunately. Wayne crossed his arms. He wanted to figure out Lowelmina's motives, and fast, but this was going to be tough. Hey, listen to this, Ninim. Wayne just told me the story of how Ant-Gadol became an imperial vassal. That's great. I imagine His Royal Highness must have spoken with great fervor. He's always thought King Ant-Gadol was the gold standard among monarchs. Is that true? Hey, Wayne. Yeah, but that's just my opinion. The turncoat king had seen through the changing times and found the right time to sell out to a superpower at the highest possible price. King Ankh-Gadol had pulled off the perfect act of treason Wayne dreamed of committing. When Wayne had learned this backstory, he'd initially cursed at himself like, damn it, he pulled it off. But this fit of jealousy didn't prevent him from realizing his goal wasn't unprecedented. He'd used every means to find out as much as he could about King Ankh-Gadol and anything related to him. He even went to great lengths to acquire his memoir. That was how he knew so much about the current Marquis. The countries in the Alliance detested him, but there was no questioning his skill. If there's anything to be learned, it's that personal history is inconsequential. As expected of you, Volanya gazed upon him with unbridled respect. It would have been nice if the current Marquis could be like you. If his father was so great, it's a shame he can't continue his legacy. Did you learn about the current Marquis? Ninim asked with a wry smile. It's unusual for greatness to be passed down to the next generation, particularly for royals. Travel the continent and you'll encounter hordes of royalty who have stepped away from their thrones. Even Marquis Ankh-Gadol was once meant to be king of his own nation. There are rumors that he's unsatisfied with his role as a vassal, and there was a certain someone on the verge of giving up his crown right next to them. Ankh-Gadol, huh? Something was flickering in the back of Wayne's mind as he replayed his lesson with Volanya. I get the feeling that we'd get along well. Maybe. Or maybe not. Wayne groaned mentally. It felt as if the answers he thought were within arm's reach, but he couldn't quite make them out through the fog. He tried to connect scraps of information in his mind, but they just wouldn't come together in a way that made sense. There wasn't enough information. He was missing something. If he had it. If only something would happen. No. He'd almost wished for something stupid. He already had his hands full hosting the envoys. There was absolutely no reason why he should be hoping for something to happen on top of that. That's right. It'd be better if nothing happened at all. Then it wouldn't even matter what Loa was scheming. I'm not hoping for truth, but peace. Tranquility. Hakleon days, which means, pardon me, your Royal Highness. An official flew into the room. An emissary has arrived with news from Sir Raklam. There are signs that fighting has broken out in their assigned territory. This is why he'd begged for nothing weird to happen, but his hopes had been dashed. They didn't even stand a chance. As with the Earthworld Empire, the Kingdom of Natra was home to a number of ethnic groups, but they had become diverse for different reasons. The Empire had forcibly absorbed various races and tribes through acts of war, whereas those from the east and west flowed into the Kingdom of Natra on their own accord. Not that it was an alluring country by any means. Its weather was harsh, its land was infertile, it was lacking in all forms of industry and entertainment. Virtually no one would call it an easy country to live in, even out of flattery. But why would people come to this place? Because they had nowhere else to go. Those who committed crimes, or those who had been persecuted for their race or ideology, or those who had lost their homes in war or suffered at the hands of the government or disease. They had been driven from their homelands with no place to start anew. As they wandered from place to place, they'd finally stumbled upon the gateway between east and west, quietly settling amid the unforgiving weather in the Kingdom of Natra. It was a slum on a nationwide scale. At least that was how Wayne described it. Those who flooded into the country were generally minorities with no fond memories of systems and institutions, which meant their thoughts on the kingdom weren't anything like, "Thank you for accepting us. We pledge our lives to this land. This isn't the start of an inspiring tale. I'm going to get my revenge. Leave us alone. If the government is going to take advantage of me, I'd rather." Terrible, pessimistic. But months became years, and those feelings melted away as they assimilated with the rest of the population, and those beside them in the royal capital were a tolerant bunch, loyal to their nation. That said, the newcomers from local tribes and villages would sometimes project their own experiences onto the citizens around them, taking their anger out in bitter scuffle after scuffle. The instigators were often small clusters of impoverished groups, and when there was no bloodshed, these fights were mostly settled by those involved by the time the government caught on. Keyword mostly. Ignoring our decree to stop and preparing for war on their own, Wayne grumbled upon reading a report in the tent. My apologies. I didn't imagine it would come to this. Raklam bowed his head before Wayne. Don't worry about it. It was my own misjudgment. It had all started with the construction of the channel on the Torrido River. The River was under the direct control of the royal family, and it flooded from time to time. Under the king's orders, they were building a new waterway to lower the volume of the main river, constructing a tributary that would run to a riverhead in a distant territory. This entire process had continued well after Wayne became regent. It had finally reached its conclusion the other day, but this was where the problem arose. Two tribes in the area that the new tributary crossed had begun fighting. The dispatched magistrates tried to persuade them to lay down their arms, but those pleas had fallen on deaf ears, and the animosity had only deepened as time went on. But that wasn't what fazed Wayne, since it wasn't unusual for quarrels to break out among their citizens. In his experience, these upstart militants were poorly armed for the most part, and that was why he'd assumed the hostilities could be quashed with trained troops dispatched by the government. And that countermeasure had been effective for a short time. With the presence of government soldiers, the magistrate tried to start negotiations once more. But then an unexpected development occurred. I can't believe it. Both tribes have obtained a huge cache of weapons. The government's show of force was the only thing that had brought the warring tribes, now backed by arms suppliers, back to the negotiating table. All of Wayne's initial assumptions had come crashing down. And no info on the source of the weapons? I'm afraid not. We know they were procured by a merchant, but we're unsure of the supply chain. I see. All right. It bothered him, but that took a backseat to suppressing the tribes. Your Royal Highness, I would like to ask one thing, Racklam requested nervously. Wayne looked at him. What's up? The person over there, Racklam pointed to a corner of the tent, a girl with a poised smile. Lowelmina Earthworld. Pay me no mind. I'm here to observe. You heard her. Okay. Anyway, I'd like you to call in some soldiers, Racklam, Wayne ordered. Are they serious? Racklam silently voiced with his confused expression. Wayne let out a sigh in his head. Geez, I honestly wonder why this happened. He thought, grumbling on the inside, as he mentally replayed the sequence of events that had brought him to this point. Reports of a disturbance had left Wayne racking his brains. He needed to go and see things for himself. In this situation, there was no question about it. There was just one issue. The Imperial Princess Lowelmina was still visiting, and he couldn't just leave his guest of honor hanging. I guess I can send Nim, or sneak out myself if this can be settled quickly. Wayne had been busy turning the gears in his mind when Lowelmina showed up. It appears there is trouble. It never occurred to him to question how she'd found out. After all, she was staying at a foreign palace which had its fair share of secrets, and it wouldn't be the least bit strange if she was using her envoys to discreetly gather information. Plus, it was entirely possible that Lowelmina was involved in this turmoil. With this in mind, he threw her a curveball. Nothing major. I'll go there myself and resolve the issue immediately, Wayne declared. This meant he'd be neglecting his guest of honor. Would Lowelmina try to stop him from leaving or see him off amicably? He was going to assess her reaction to see if she was part of this whole scheme. I see. Well then, I'll come with you. What? This had Wayne scrambling, along with her entire delegation. There was no way that the envoys could bring the Imperial Princess to a potential battlefield. Even though they belonged to an entirely different faction, to get her to change her mind, they attempted to persuade her out of it, with Faish leading the charge. We came with the purpose of confirming whether we could continue our alliance with Natra, Lowelmina replied, with a threat of war looming over the entire continent. This is a good opportunity for me to see Prince Wayne, a considerable leader, in action, but is dangerous and an unfounded concern. I'll have the regent of this nation by my side. Nothing could be safer, she asserted. They could only stay silent in response. Great. I'll be under your care, Wayne. And that's how Wayne was roped into going to Racklam with Lowelmina in tow.